Tyler Simmons, what is your opinion of Pascal's wager? Okay, I made some notes on this one because I need to talk about what Pascal's wager is for those of you out there who have never heard of this. And you might find it kind of interesting. It has to do with religion and Christianity specifically, but I actually just drew from, I just looked it up on Wikipedia because Pascal's actual wager was quoted there, and I'm not going to read that because it's centuries old writing and it reads a little cryptically. But there are some interpretations and layout of this, and so I'm going to read that. Okay, so Pascal basically argues that a rational person should live as though God exists and seeks to believe in God. If God does not actually exist, such a person will have only a finite loss, some pleasures, luxury, etc., whereas he stands to receive infinite gains as represented by eternity in heaven and avoid infinite losses, eternity in hell, right? In other words, it's a safe bet to believe in God because if you're wrong, no big deal, and if you're right, well, you get all the rewards, okay? That's the basic idea of Pascal's wager. It is, as I understand it and from what I read, a Christian apologetics argument. It is intended to create new believers, and Pascal was a believer. Pascal begins by painting a situation where both the existence and non-existence of God are impossible to prove by human reason. And on this, I agree with him. So, supposing that reason cannot determine the truth between the two options, one must wager, you have to make a bet, by weighing the possible consequences. Pascal's assumption is that when it comes to making the decision, no one can refuse to participate. Withholding assent is impossible because we're already embarked by living our lives. Okay, so we have to make a choice. There's no sitting this one out according to the constraints of how we laid this thing out. Pascal considers that if there is equal risk of loss and gain, right, coin toss 50-50, then human reason is powerless to address the question of whether God exists. That being the case, then human reason can only decide the question according to possible resulting happiness of the decision, weighing the gain and loss in believing that God exists, and likewise in believing that God does not exist. Okay, so this wager, okay, so now here's some of my statements on this. This wager assumes a Christian God. It has been applied to other religions apparently as well, but I'm taking it in the context in which it was originally made by Pascal himself. And that assumes the existence of a Christian God. I do not believe in that concept of a God, nor do I find that concept makes a whole lot of sense to me. Okay, I get how it provides comfort to people. It provides a supportive framework for the mysteries and problems of life in the universe, and I get that there is a comfort level to that. I get all the other, reasons why religion exists. It's a social construct to bring people together around common ground. It provides a moral construct for people to live their lives. I mean, I get all of those things, okay? So none of what I'm saying here is a commentary on any of that. I'm strictly speaking about the conception of God as an entity. I do not believe that a Christian God is a God that I can believe in because I find the whole thing pretty ludicrous and ridiculous. The reason I find it that way is because, like the Greek gods, the Christian God is more a reflection of the times in which he was created by the people who wrote biblical scriptures and have interpreted them over the many, many years. It's more, that God to me is more a reflection of those people and their ideas and their prejudices and biases and hatreds than it is a reflection of what I would think of as some entity that is capable of creating the entire universe that we exist in. The scope and size of our universe is beyond our comprehension. What entity would be capable of creating such a realm of existence? Well, such an entity would have to exist outside of time and space as we understand it, and we barely understand time-space as it is right now. We're really only figuring things out, and quantum mechanics is telling us that all the things we think are true might not be, but that's a whole nother thing. So there's lots of complications and things to think about with all of this. So if you're going to kind of bring it all into a ball and go, okay, God created this, and that's how you want to think about it, how how would we ever think about ourselves in relation to such an entity? How could such an entity who could be capable of creating such an infinite cosmos of possibility and then life that exists in this cosmos, how could such an entity care at all what I had for breakfast this morning, what my masturbatory practices are, who and what I'm having sex with? How would that even enter the realm of the thinking of such an entity? I can't go there. I just can't figure out how that makes any sense to anybody. Unless you bring this entity down to a level that is something that you can understand, which means you have to personify it and you have to use human values to do that. And I don't do that, right? I don't think that's the way that such an entity would be, and I can't think of such an entity that way. So I believe, ultimately, that such an entity could possibly exist, but I, at the same time, don't believe that said entity cares one iota about my existence or is even aware of my existence. Why would he be, or she be, or whatever? Does gender even apply at that level? You know what I mean? Like, we use the word he in a very generic sense. So that's my first level of comment on this. After reading up on Pascal's wager, I discovered that I fall into what is called the argument from inconsistent revelations category. This is my other problem with Pascal's wager. This basically says, this argument from inconsistent revelations basically says, great, you want me to choose to believe, but what version of belief do I choose? Since there's so many different belief systems, which all claim to be the one true faith. There's another problem with this. Pascal basically wrote this whole idea off, according to what I read, because he was making a Christian apologetics argument, and he wasn't interested in engaging at a deeper level with this question. From what I saw, he basically blew this off by saying that if you get into the details of Christianity, you'll find that it's the one true religion. So he wrote off all of paganism and any non-white religions as obvious superstition, but he was completely unable to point that same criticalness at his own religion, as is usual for apologists. So, for example, what if Odin, right, Norse god, what if Odin's real? And I go off believing with all my heart in Christ and the Holy Trinity. I'm fulfilling the needs of Pascal's wager, and yet I'm still getting it totally wrong. So I'm screwed in that situation, right? So Pascal's wager has a pretty limited logic if you look at Christianity as just one of the thousands of religions that exist on this planet. And this is one of the main reasons why I don't go down these rabbit holes or comment or talk about them very often on my channel. You know, I am an agnostic atheist. I don't believe in God in the same sense or way that I've so far heard anybody else describe God. You know, what I talked about a few minutes ago, nobody talks about God in that sense, not in any religious circles I know of. And there's no organized religion I'm aware of that worships such a God, because the very concept of God as that kind of entity deflects any idea of worship. Why would such an entity want to be worshipped or need human beings paying any attention to it at all? Right? It just doesn't make any sense. So that's why I look at organized religion as bringing God down. If there is such an entity, then I think organized religions are getting it wrong, because they're bringing God down to what we are. And we are not anything even remotely capable of creating something like this cosmos and universe that we live in. So, you know, that's kind of my big picture look at this whole thing. And I don't know that I've ever really laid it all out in detail like that. So I thought this was an opportunity to do so. And these are all just my own personal, you know, ways of looking at things. And, but that's might help clarify why it is that I call myself an agnostic atheist and don't associate with organized religion